It is now time to say hello to Tom Ducey. It's 3 o'clock, and this is the November 4th, 2019 meeting of the Architecture Advisory Committee. Please silence all cell phones and pagers. Planning Director is out today, and Edward Robertson is going to sit in. Edward, roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the AAC. So, Member John Walsh,
I am here.
Member John McCoy,
Present.
Member Sean Lockyer is still not here, Member Tom Dorsey,
Present.
Member Steve Pauling,
Here.
Vice Chair Rotman,
Here.
Chair Tom Jackway.
Here.
So we do have a quorum to proceed with today's meeting.
Thank you. May we have a staff report on the posting of the agenda, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So the agenda was posted on Thursday, October 31, 2019, consistent with the state law. So this meeting has been noticed appropriately.
Thank you. Does the committee have any revisions to the agenda? Do we have a motion to accept?
Move to accept.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Since this is a public meeting, audience members are permitted to comment on any issue that is within this committee's purview. Comments on an item appearing on today's agenda are made at the time that that item is presented. If anybody wants to speak on an item not on today's agenda, you may speak now. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. Okay. So the minutes of last week's meeting, do we have a motion to approve the minutes? I'm sorry, the meeting of the 7th of October. I'm abstaining because I was not in attendance at that meeting.
I'm abstaining as well.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to accept the minutes in their current form.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And passes unanimously with 2 abstentions.
Yes.
There is no unfinished business, so we'll move right to new business, and it is PS Property Company Holding LLC for a minor architectural application to an existing 12,000 square foot commercial center to include a facade remodel, landscape improvements, and parking lot renovation of the Sosa Market Shopping Center located at 3700 East Vistacino Road. May we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The project that's before you today is the Sosa Market, which is at the corner of Executive Drive, Gene Autry Trail, and Vistacino. The shopping center was built several decades ago and was part of Riverside County. It was annexed into the city, so we have very limited history on the property as far as original plans or drawings or landscape or design of the parking lot. So today, it gives us a chance to bring it up to today's codes, which is what we're trying to accomplish with a review of this project. So as you mentioned, Chair, it's a 13,000 square foot building, has roughly 6 spaces that are, or tenant units that are in there, includes a grocery store, market, restaurant, a cannabis dispensary, and then there was a mattress store at the corner. So what they're proposing to do is remove the mansard roof to rehab the front facade and the 2 sides of the building to a more modern look. You'll notice in this photograph there are some existing palm trees, light poles, and there is parking that's in the center of the parking lot currently now. At one point on the very right-hand side, there used to be an ice dispensing machine that was removed several years ago, and you'll see that the dumpster area is also to the right hand of the slide. This is a slide of the existing conditions. You'll see that in the middle of the site there is a parking area with very minimal landscaping around within the parking lot, and it does not meet today's standards of shading or ADA accessibility to the site. What they're proposing to do is add a median in the middle of the parking lot to provide landscaping. Also, they've added multiple fingers in the islands, or in the parking lot to provide spaces for shade trees to meet our shading requirement. One other thing that they've done is there's an entry off of Gene Autry Trail that is a state highway. They're not proposing to change that entry at all, which is on the left-hand side of the slide. But on the right-hand slide, if I go back one, you'll see there's two driveways off of Executive. One that is towards the dumpster area and one that is farther to the south or the corner. So they're proposing to keep the one that is to the north towards the dumpster, but yet extend the curb and parking to separate the two so that there's only one main drive aisle into the shopping center. So they're moving some of the components. If I go back, you'll see moving it farther away from the corner, which is safer for traffic movements. So looking at the landscape plan, you'll notice that there's a mix of shade trees, understory plants such as yuccas and Mexican bird of paradise. Some of the larger trees are acacia and palo verde trees. And you'll see that this also provides shading of the parking lot, which is the dash lines of the cars. Staff is concerned that the prominent corners of Gene Autry and Vistacino and then Executive Drive need additional landscaping or some sort of signature landscaping to make it more interesting. There currently is a large sign that is there that will be removed. However, we do anticipate that some sort of additional signage would come in as part of a sign program, and we're not sure what that looks like at this time. So there's an exhibit showing the types of trees that they're proposing. And then to the architectural design. So when they first submitted the application, there was a design that staff felt needed some work. We helped them along with devising colors that we felt that the AEC and the Planning Commission would like, and that is what's being passed around today. Right now is the material board. So it's a combination of smooth and rough stucco, ringlets to provide some definition of the units, and sort of coins to make the columns, and then glazing system with aluminum framing and glazing with a door, and then two side lights above each, and then a transom above each of the windows. So the building heights, the flat portion on the right has a maximum height, I think, of 24. Actually, bear with me here. I'm sorry, 19 feet is the flat portion, and then there is a tower element that's at the southwest corner, and that's 29 feet 3 inches to the very, very top of it. In this, the roof that they're proposing will be standing seam metal roof, and in a darker color, which there's an example of that's on the material board. And the cap, or this tower element, has four sides to it. Originally only had one side, and we worked with them to make it all four sides so it was more of a prominent element of the buildings. So let me jump down here. So here's a color rendering of what the design will look like. And I'll go back to the lighting in just a second. So this is the side that faces Vistacino. This is the side that faces Executive Drive, and you'll see that they've added a little trellis section or element to the one corner which is closest to the dumpster and the Executive Drive area. The rear of the building, and if you remember in the aerial, the rear, this backs up to a electrical substation, so it's not really visible from that next door parcel. And this is the side that will face Gene Autry Trail. And you can see that the cap is similar in all four sides. What we tried to do was get the building, because it's very flat, to get some kind of relief, some kind of push and pull to add. We also discussed canopies and awnings and so on, and the applicant came back with this design. So going back to the lights, the lighting is a series of two poles that are 18 feet tall with light heads on them that will focus down, LED lights, full cutoff. And the photometric plan conforms to what the city lighting standard is. It's not too bright, but yet it's bright enough that it will light the parking lot. If I go back to this slide, you'll see that there are some lights on the side of the building. In one of the original plans, there was a lighting that was inappropriate, and now they've come back with lighting that is a light that focuses straight down. I think we have a detail of it. So on the very left, you'll see that there's a detail of that light that will focus down. So I have a series of photographs of what it looks like now. You'll see that there's a sidewalk and then there's a median strip that is maybe 6 feet wide until you get to the parking lot. All the signage that you see there will be removed. The mansard roof will be removed, and you'll see the different elements of the flat portion and then the tower element to the left. And notice the lights that are there now. This is the corner of Gene Autry and Vistacino. As I mentioned, there's a sign that will be removed. There's a lot of utility lines there, and we want to increase the landscaping to spruce this corner up. And then this is the corner on Executive. There's not much room to do much anything because of the sidewalk and the new curb that was put in. But once again, you'll see the dumpsters that are to the right that will remain. And kind of where those palm trees are now is where the new driveway will go into the dumpsters or into the parking lot. So Chair, that concludes my report. We do have a recommendation that the applicant submit a sign program to be adopted by the Planning Commission prior to issuance of any sign permits for future tenants in the building. So a sign program would come back to AAC and would be approved by the Planning Commission, so you will see the signage. And we are requesting that they rework the landscape areas at the two street corners to be reviewed by a AAC subcommittee if you so choose, or if you want to see the whole package again, you could do that also. So that concludes my report, and the applicant is here today.
Does the committee have any questions of staff? Robert?
Just for clarification, so when you talked about the sign program, all the individual tenants will come in with new signage as part of the sign program?
No, what'll happen is they'll hire a sign company that will devise an area that will include sizes, sign types, fonts, cutoffs, if it's what kind of lighting it is, if it's push-through letters, if it's halo, and you will do an overall sort of concept of what the signage would be, and then when the individual tenants come in, we would look at that at staff level.
And maybe you don't know this, but are all the existing tenants remaining during construction?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No, I
Okay,
don't know.
I'll ask the
Right.
applicant. Thank you.
Tom?
Glenn, I had a question. So it appears that they have increased the landscape frontage along Vistacino, but it's a little difficult to read the dimension there. Do you have an idea of how much that area's been increased?
In my drawing, it looks like 10 feet.
Additional? Oh, I see it.
I'd have to go up and look.
Yeah, they show 10, and it looks like it might have been 4 before, 4.7 or something.
Well, looking at this photograph, it's not much.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess the other question is that regarding the power lines, did they take in consideration when they placed the palm trees and so forth, not to interfere with those towards the,
We'd have to ask.
okay.
Any other questions of staff? Glenn, I have a question. I'm surprised that there aren't fire exits out of the back of these stores. I notice there's a strip of land that could be used as a exit. Has the fire marshal looked at this, do you know, or fire department to see if fire exits would be required.
Right, this was routed to our fire marshal to look at. I know it's tough to see, but there is, an area behind the building that's got a gate so that people can't go back there. But it is probably, and the substation sits a little bit higher, so there's a wall that runs between the substation and then the sidewalk, that there's exit doors for the back, I think, of the units.
Looking at the elevation, it doesn't show any doors. That's where the
Right.
question came to my mind. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I know that somebody is here representing the applicant. Would you like to come forward and make a presentation? Give us your name and address, and you have 10 minutes to present and 2 minutes of rebuttal after we have our discussion.
Okay, my name is Dave Madden, I'm the architect. Address is 35493 Veranda Circle, Wildomar, California.
Thank you. Give us a little walkthrough of what you did and what you want to point out.
The owners are proposing to enhance the corner. It's a very old, tired building. Parking doesn't work, landscaping is non-existent at best. So they're proposing to enhance it. They're going to be moving the dispensary to the far left-hand side where the tower is. The current tenant on the very far left is a mattress store, which is going to be leaving. There are 2 empty suites right now, so they're occupying the 3 to the left. The restaurant is remaining, and the grocery store is remaining during construction. We do have some drainage issues in the back that are going to be remedied. All the tenants right now that are there have the doors bolted closed, locked. The gates are locked. There's no access at all. They do have water intrusion when it rains, so that's all going to be remedied.
Is that any more presentation? I mean, that's probably enough. It lets us know what's going on.
The design is trying to enhance the corner of the building on the far left-hand side as we go away. We didn't want a flat building. We wanted more of a building that changed with some common elements. We have the ins and outs, we have the ups and downs. It's, the windows are changing, the storefronts are changing out, the tenants are going to remain during construction, which is going to be difficult, but they'll stay there. The front sidewalk needs to be redone for ADA accessing. The whole facility, the whole site is just tired.
Okay, do we have any questions from the committee of the applicant?
I have a question. Regarding the sidewalk that is adjacent, the proposed sidewalk adjacent to the building, did someone take a look at maybe, I noticed in the center they have like a 13-foot wide landscape strip in the parking lot.
Yes?
Is there any potential to maybe reduce the width of that and widen the sidewalk that's adjacent to the face of the building?
We
Just to
could.
give a little bit more room in there, as cars pull up.
Right, we could do that, but then we're pulling the driveway on the right side closer towards the corner.
Oh, and you're limited by
We're
that.
trying to keep it as far back as possible for safety. We can't do anything with the driveway on the left side. So just for
Okay.
easiness in and out, leaving the sidewalk where it is, because we are not protruding the mansard over, so it's going to look more open.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? The existing palm trees that are there?
Oh, they're gone,
Okay, thank you.
real quick.
Robert?
Yeah, so in the staff report, it talks about rough stucco and smooth stucco. So what are you proposing, and where is that actually going to happen?
Do you want to go up and talk on the?
If we look at the corbels,
You can actually go up to this exhibit with the mic. Thank you.
this area right here, these guys here would be the rough stucco. The other areas would be the smooth.
And is it a dash finish, or what is it?
And it's just going to be a standard rough stucco, straight rough.
Okay.
And these other areas would be a smooth stucco.
Okay, and then your approach on the colors. Talk to me about your approach.
We originally chose some darker colors, but the city recommended we go with lighter. So we lightened
Okay.
up the colors.
So there's what, 3 different accent colors or 3 different stucco colors? Would you just kind of point out where it is? It's a little hard on the exhibits that we saw.
The white colors are going to be predominantly up above in these higher areas.
So that's your main stucco
Right.
color? Okay.
Then the corners, the columns would be the darker stucco.
Uh-huh.
And then the insets, as we go back, would be the secondary colors.
And then there's a third accent?
The third accent colors would be the bands,
The eyebrows.
the eyebrows.
Okay.
They're
And
not really coming out, they're more like a band.
that was my next question, is what's the depth of that?
It
They-
varies, if we look at the floor plan, it varies. So we're
Okay.
trying to keep.
Glenn, I don't think his microphone is working.
You have to hold it.
Oh, okay, how about now? Got it?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we look at the floor plan, we can bring that up.
Do I have the floor plan? I don't know if I have the floor plan.
See that?
There you go.
I don't think we have the floor plan.
We didn't want to bring it too far out.
Right.
We wanted to maintain, the original facade of the building is maintained with these areas. These columns come out different depths
Okay.
for enhancements.
And what about the eyebrows?
These are just bands. They're not really an eyebrow
I
that's
see.
sticking out. They're just a band, stucco band going across the top for accentuation.
Okay.
And if we look at this side, this guy, if we look at the other side, the front view, he doesn't stick out very far. We'll go back one. You can see how,
Sorry.
you can see how we're coming in and out.
Yeah, I was more asking about the horizontal
Yeah,
band
these
eyebrow.
bands right here,
Yes,
they're really
yeah.
not sticking out very far to be called an eyebrow. It's more
Okay.
like, just like a header band.
Okay. Because what I noticed is with your location of lights on the outside of the building, some are located above the band.
Right.
And then you would just basically block the light.
They're out far enough and the band's in close enough, so we're not doing it. The band is most likely just like a 3x stick out.
Okay. All right, thank you.
It looks like these are the pop-outs.
Yeah.
Did you consider an eyebrow? Because, you know, this building does face due south, and that facade, I'm sure, is blazing hot. So having some shade coverage of the glass below might not be a bad idea.
We could put some eyebrow stick outs on the main left side, the main door, the window series to the left and to the right, and we can wrap around the corner.
Okay.
We drove around the city, there's a lot of buildings that are similar, where they don't really take in consideration any kind of shading devices.
Right.
If the driveway on the far right side could pull closer to the corner, we could go back to more of a deepened look with some columns.
Is that driveway location something that was established by the engineering department, or do we have a little leeway to move that?
I can answer that. So when you have a intersecting street, like, is that Executive Drive, is that the name of it?
Yes.
When it intersects a major thoroughfare, if you were to, can I use your mic for a second? So if this is the property line here as it wraps around, the way that the code reads is from, if you were to extend this property line and where these two intersect, this driveway can't be any closer than 100 feet from a major thoroughfare. That's per our municipal code. So right now, we probably don't meet it as it is, but that's as far north as we're going to be able to get it to still functionally work, so.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, it looks like now it's about 70-something feet.
It's tight.
Any other questions of the applicant, Tom?
I had one question. In the design of the perimeter wall around the parking, it has a curvilinear form. And I was just wondering what the thinking behind that was when the building has some geometry to it and then that curved wall.
It's a requirement for the landscape issue in the parking lot to have a blockage, some sort of a visual stoppage. A straight wall, boring.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you. Have a seat back in our audience, and we'll discuss and hopefully be home soon.
And what? Let's go on.
Okay, committee's comments. Who wants to go first? John? No. Tom Dosey?
I had some comments regarding the landscaping. I guess one question was the curved wall, and I'm just trying to get a picture of that in my mind, how that works with the building in the background. I think it doesn't necessarily have to be straight, but it could have some ins and outs and create some areas, for planting. The next item was the predominant plant material around the perimeter are the hesperaloes. And I'm just wondering if that was done for a certain look, or typically we could use those in groupings, but there's not a lot going on with those when they're not in bloom. And my thought was that maybe there could be some groupings of those and then some other shrubs in between, and then they could repeat themselves. But really, when you look at the plan, it's the predominant plant all the way around. So I think it's going to look pretty sparse, even when they start to mature, once it's open, or as they mature. And then some ideas on the corners. I think those should be enhanced as staff has pointed out. And I think at executive, maybe they look at moving the wall back similarly the way they did to the west by Gene Autry to create a larger space on that corner. And then maybe the introduction of some other types of decorative rock on the corners. Because there's a pretty strong corner across the street, where they've done the Palm Springs entry sign, and I'd like to see some kind of play off of some of the materials there to kind of create more of an entry into the city that tied together. Thank you.
Who's next? John Walsh?
From an overview standpoint.
John, can you put your mic on?
I think that within an urban context, this is one of those sort of de facto portals to the city. This is a very traversed intersection. And, you end up going through there once or twice a day sometimes. So I think it is very predominant. And kind of when I look at it, and some of the, so anything that is making an improvement is certainly welcomed and better. And I want to sort of voice an enthusiasm that an important corner like that is getting an investment of money and care at this point. That said, I think that there are issues with respect to the existing architecture that in contrast to what you're proposing, are of interest. Right now, that mansard roof, albeit perhaps unattractive, does give a shadow line across there. And yes, it is a south-facing exposure. It's going to be kind of brutal and difficult to walk. I think that there might be some way of making that pedestrian entrance into the building more pleasant with something that had some depth to it. And perhaps that was a struggle in terms of some of the dimensions that were available. I don't know. As I look at the elevations, can we bring them up? Okay. That's fine.
Here you go.
It's fine.
Get the mic.
John. It's on.
There is a rhythm and a particular like kind or differentiation between these elements, and I'm not saying necessarily when you have a repeated form of function that it wouldn't necessarily be okay to have something that was more rhythmically like kind. If I were to approach it, I would think, oh, is the restaurant I'm going to here or whatever. So there are architectural demarcations that seem to be telling us something that doesn't necessarily carry through into the floor plan. And then, it just has a feeling of being a bit arbitrary in terms of the here and there with these different elements. I would not be afraid of a planar elevation, and I think I personally would risk it to get something that looked a little more settled and kind of consistent with respect to the storefront vocabulary that is really going on there. And then the last thing that I would mention is, the corner, it's sort of like life stops once you wrap around that corner, and whatever goes on, it would certainly be an asset to kind of have it look as though the sides were as important as the front. That's it.
Thank you. John McCoy?
So with the landscape, I appreciate the plant selection. It's appropriate for the site. It's rough out there, it's windy. But the layout is a little sparse, a little uninteresting, based on knowledge of how landscapers take care of landscapes like this in the city. The scale, the growth patterns, growth habits of plants that are chosen will wind up being round or square shapes, just out of maintenance. Some of them will get too big for their space, so they're going to have to be controlled, and that's what winds up happening in the city. The shade on the parking lot is great. My concern is with future sign program. How much are those going to be blocked, and what will be the maintenance on those trees? Will they be allowed to grow and allowed to shade, or will they be cut to a point where they are not very representative of their natural form? So I agree with that. This is an important corner in terms of the city, and across the street is a very attractive site that can be played off of. And I think that was a great suggestion by Tom. Excuse me. We don't know what the signs are going to look like, whether they're lighted or not. We don't know what that's going to be. Thus, the current lighting plan that you've put in is extremely utilitarian. You're spending a lot of money redoing this building, and nighttime effect is not going to represent that. The Lithonia fixtures are certainly, they do the job of what you have laid out. You've got 5,000 Kelvin spec'd, and that's extremely white, bluish white, and not very attractive. So I did look at the spec. There is a 4,000 K option available, so at least bringing it down to that will help somewhat. And I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you. Steve?
I'll go. I, have drive by this place quite a bit and go to Paul's Bar, which is a great place. So I'm very happy to see something happen to this sad little building. That said, I do think, since it's south-facing, I do think it would benefit from some kind of shade coverage over the walkway to make it a bit more inviting to the storefronts. I tend to agree with John that simplifying the facade a bit might help, because it does look a little bit busy it feels like there's a lot going on there. And it's not overly necessary, I don't think. My concern with not seeing the signage is I don't know where it's going and how they're going to be, each unit is going to be consistent with signage. Because if you look at the tall piece, the sign, I'm assuming, would go above the bar, as we're calling it. On the far right, I'm assuming it would go on those big panels above, but in the middle, there really isn't that opportunity. So that center piece where the light is, I don't know where the sign goes. So I think we need to think about signage with respect to the facade so that it works. Because I can't, as I look at this, I'm trying to think of where signs go, and I can't really logically, figure that out. Regarding the parking lot, the only thing that I think it's great in terms of the layout, the only thing I would think is that we probably need a couple walkthroughs of the planter area in the center, because people will park in the center and walk right across it and trample planting because they don't want to walk all the way around. So I would think about having some pedestrian access across that planter. And that's my comment.
Thank you. Robert?
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, I again, want to acknowledge that this is a building that needs help, and appreciate the owner putting the money towards that. I have a couple of comments. Some of them are repetitive to the other members, but one thing, I'll start with I like a standing seam marble roof. To me, it evokes a more contemporary look for the architecture, and I think your horizontal treatment of your columns, your pilasters, tend to go a little bit too traditional. So I think there's a nice vocabulary that's sort of started with the recessed entries, that maybe you can pick something up and simplify those pilasters. I do have concerns also about the signage and the location, and I think actually rather than having lights that are floodlights, that maybe you bring it down to a more pedestrian scale, so maybe it's underneath the eyebrows, and that would free up the space more for signage, whatever that ends up being. I also think it would be worth looking at creating some sort of projection to create some solar shading over the entrances. I think it'll add a little more dimension to the building as well, and it wouldn't impact potentially your limited dimension that you have from the base of the storefront to the curb. Regarding the colors, I think actually you need a little more contrast. Because this is primarily south-facing, all these whites and off-whites are going to wash out, and it'll all look like the same color. So I think you should maybe look at darkening some of these tones a little bit and play with that a little bit. And I think that may be it. So thank you.
Okay. I haven't heard any comments that I disagree with. I think that these have been good suggestions. I'm so pleased to see this ugly little box become an important looking building here. I think all of my comments would be regarding the landscaping. And the first one's a pretty big suggestion. Instead of having that landscape island floating in the middle of the parking lot, what if that were brought down to the south? So that now the street frontage landscaping would be twice as wide. You'd still have the same amount of parking because you'd just move those parking spaces north somewhat. We wouldn't have the problem that Member McCoy is concerned with the trees in that island are going to be cut so that they're like little squares. I mean, our city just did that on the medians of Tuckwitz. All those beautiful mesquite trees are now flat on both sides. So if the landscaping were brought south, trees could become their mature and natural form. And also we wouldn't have that issue of walking through. On your tree selection, you have mostly on the big trees Palo Verdes and Ruslantia. I think that's an odd combination. I think the leaf shape and form of the Ruslantia doesn't have the desert feel, and I would wonder if maybe using a mesquite or something like that instead of the Ruslantia might make a more homogeneous palette. And I think, thinking of Member Dosey's comment about the corner, to make that mirror more of the park that's across the street, where it's mostly all Washingtonian philodendron and other desert landscape, and really make that a statement and let it be a little different than the rest of the landscaping. And finally, I think I agree that the serpentine wall seems out of place to the flat building. You could certainly do a combination of walls that might be stepped back a foot or two from each other, where you have a 3-foot wall that's 30 foot long and a 4-foot wall that's 40 feet long, and get a little play in plane and in height, but keep it more geometric. And I don't see any mechanical equipment. I see it there, but it's not shown on the plan. So I'd just like to make sure, I'm assuming it's going to stay on the roof there. And it looks like the parapets are high enough to block it, but I would just want to make sure that the parapets that you're proposing are high enough to block all that existing mechanical. And that's my comments. Any rebuttal from the applicant, or does it?
Well, we can definitely simplify the elevation and make it more uniform and take away the character of the differences across. We can definitely add some eyebrows for some shading. As far as pulling the landscape strip closer towards the street, I would eliminate parking on the left side, right side. If we go back to the site plan, I have parking on the left-hand, right side. So if I move my parking on the street closer towards the building, I would eliminate 5 spots, and which now does not allow a building to work for parking. Landscape enhancements, no problem. Sign program, I will push the owner to get a sign program started. And,
Can you add the breaks in the middle?
yeah, putting the walkways through, yes. We don't want them trampling through. So, yeah, we can simplify the building, make it more uniform all the way across. We can take that large flat piece on the right side and just extend it all the way across and just get rid of a lot of the standing seam roof and only have it at the tower in the middle, if that's what we're looking for a building. The columns, I can take off some of the riglets and make them more,
Simple.
way more simple. So, yeah, we can take a lot of the enhancements off and make it more, in my opinion, more boring than what it is. So we're trying to get away from the long mansard look that it was there and make a noticeable change. Darken up the colors, we can do more contrasting. We can do all those items. But the dispensary's taking the 3 window bays on the left, the restaurant's in the middle, and the grocery store's on the right-hand side.
Yeah, I don't mind the variation across the facade, given that it does break it up. I mean, you don't want to see one solid kind of, look all the way across, because it does kind of improve the scale of the building overall. I think it just feels a little bit busy for
We can
the
simplify
size
it.
of it. So I think it's really just kind of stepping back a little bit, and it'd be great.
We can get rid of some of the columns. We can remove the header band and put some eyebrow shade. But it's a tough it's a tough building to make look good. That front is just straight. And as far as the 2 sides go, I thought we enhanced the sides. We added windows on the far left side, and we did the trellis on the right hand where the trash enclosure is. And we brought the roof down on the left-hand side. On the street, we extended the mansard roof down. And that mansard roof doesn't come forward, it goes back.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Or some more comments?
A question. In regards, is it right at the max? I mean, are there any give or take on any of the parking stalls?
No,
No.
we're right there.
Because I was looking, without drawing it, it looks like you could almost pick up 3, and one of my thoughts was, and I'd have to refer to Glenn or Edward, by making that landscape area so wide along the street frontage, you could probably eliminate that one island, so that would pick up a spot. And then I was thinking, if you just mirrored the parking lot, you could pick up 2 more near each of the entries, so that's 3. So if there was ability to do some compacts, if maybe.
We do have compacts on there now.
Right, so the compact spaces are these are the compact spaces here.
Yeah, I think.
Right, so could they substitute, where they have the standard spaces, where we're talking about bringing that island down, make some of those compact spaces and try to?
Well, no, the zoning code requires the first, so many of them have to be standard, then they can be compacted
But
right at that.
they are overparked by 3 spaces.
They're overparked by 3 spaces. They need 43, they're providing 46.
I mean, I think it's worth a study on the parking lot, because I think that's a good suggestion, and then you've really created a nice streetscape area along Vistacino.
Any other comments?
Suggestion, you all are thinking of eliminating the center island, is that correct? Okay, right.
But this is the issue.
That you knock out the side spaces.
You might just lose one here and one here, kind of compromise,
Okay,
so that if that much landscaping can come down here.
uh-huh.
And then pick up that one planter island along that south parking bay.
I think it makes the landscaping so much more efficient, that you don't have to maintain these 3 different little strips of things, and it lets you really create a pretty significant statement then along the street.
And the parking lot may actually function a little better.
That would be an underlying question, or does that yield a better, safer parking arrangement?
I'm concerned it might not, because
Yeah.
when you remove that planter in the center, then it
It's a
becomes kind of a
buffer.
free-for-all. There's no, you'd have to then have some kind of barrier to create the loop, or else you've got,
No, I think it creates a typical parking lot where you've got the driving aisle in the center and you take your choice, because now if you go down one side and you see a spot on the other, you have to go all the way around the loop to get to it, where normally you would just drive down and turn in here or turn in there.
I'm kind of on Steve's camp. If I'm understanding correctly, you could have potentially 48 feet of drive aisle.
Yes.
If you eliminate that center island, you have, you're basically got 48 feet of drive aisle, which is lot of asphalt.
Yeah.
I don't know that it really accomplishes
Yes.
a better site plan.
No, I think what they're saying is that moves down, and then those, you would have a typical standard, or you'd have to allow for the offset in the driveways. Actually, it could push that one driveway further away from Vistacino along Gene Autry. So
That
you'd have
one-
a
No,
standard
that
90-degree
can't
parking.
move.
Oh, that one can't
That
move.
Yeah,
can't
that's-
move.
Because you wouldn't get it pushed back, is that correct?
No, you would have a typical like 90-degree parking lot.
Suffice to say, there are a few options that are probably worth looking at.
Right.
But I am torn, because I think that to strip the center of any landscaping would be less attractive than what I'm looking at here now. So I can see some balance there. That is a hot, gritty little parking lot.
Yeah, when you look at the
Yeah.
photographs of the
Yeah.
existing.
In July.
Do we have a motion?
Why don't we ask Edward to read back the comments, and then just so we know where we are on the site plan.
Well, most of your comments are centered around the building facade, and I think that majority of the comments centered on the fact that it's too busy. It needs to be simplified a little bit. Some members suggested the eliminations of some of those columns or the riglet itself that are so pronounced, and or perhaps to have more contrasting colors also on the facade. I think that the applicant has agreed to do a further restudy of that. I think that the most challenging issue is the site plan layout, which is very unfortunate because it is an existing site that has been there for decades. So at first I thought that the suggestion from the chairman would have been a functional one, but again, listening to the fact that it could create an open area for all kinds of activities without that little buffer there of that center median, that could create an issue there. So, along with the fact that it could lead to the elimination of 4 parking spaces. So, and then the issues of the signage, the concerns of the fact that we don't know how the sign program could be implemented. But the fact is that we do not have that currently in front of us, and there is no provision or requirement that the sign program be submitted simultaneously as the architectural review. So we really could not hold that as a way to evaluate the project. But it will come back to you. It will work. Hopefully, when it comes back to you, it will work with what we already have at the site. So.
Yeah, I don't think we need to see the sign program at this point. I just think that it needs to be addressed where the signage is going so that it integrates properly with the facade. That's all I'm looking for.
Basic parameters
Yeah.
of it.
Right, so if they were to come back and have dashed areas as to where they think the signage is going to go.
Do
Okay.
it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think if the landscape island were to stay where it is, then the large plant material, should be switched to palms or something that grows tall that will not overhang the parking spaces.
So, Mr. Chair, in summary, I see this project coming back before you, but we do want you to give us some very specific directions of what to look at when it comes back before you.
I have one more question. You mentioned the fire exit situation. Can we see that, and what is the requirements for lighting on that exit? Are there going to be lights on the backside? Do they have to be on 24 hours? What's the, I don't know what the code requirement for having that exit is.
Yeah, knowing now that they're locked, I mean, if there were a fire to break out in the front of any of those spaces, those people could never get out.
Right. And also, we've got 18-foot poles specified for the parking lot, which is very much big box store scale. Can the 18-foot tall light post be brought down to a more pedestrian scale?
Well, actually, this is a commercial center, so the maximum height for lighting poles in commercial center is 24 feet. So 18 feet is already less than what the code requires.
Okay.
If there were palm trees in the island, could the lights be on the trees?
Yeah.
Such as what they did down at.
Light rings.
Yeah, something we can look into.
Okay, how do we approach this, Edward?
So, how about, given the fact that this may be the last meeting of the month, and I say may, because that could change, how about having a subcommittee to work with staff and the applicant so that it could be handled expeditiously without having to wait till next year before this comes back?
So are
to
you suggesting that we would propose approving the project with a subcommittee of the AAC to meet with the client or with the applicant to modify the detailing and respond to the comments that we've made at this
Exactly.
committee, but it would not have to come back
come
to
back
the
to the
committee?
full, correct.
But it
we
would
bring-
come back separately for signage?
Exactly.
May I ask, alternatively, it would be rescheduled for when?
And that's the fear, because this is the only meeting of this month, and it's only on November 4th. So it would have been December 6th or so.
Okay,
Yeah.
that,
This application has been in the works for almost 8 months now, so.
I see, okay.
If we vote to approve it with the stipulation that it comes to the committee, or we establish a subcommittee, if the subcommittee and the applicant can't agree on the revisions that he brings back, then would it have to come back to the committee at that point? Or if the subcommittee approves it, then it does just go straight through as approved?
Yeah, if the subcommittee agrees that all the recommendations and comments made today have been addressed, that will be it. It will go to the director for final approval. However, if there are impasse, say not able to, we will not approve it. We will not recommend approval to the director. It has to at least have a 95% conformance with what you all agree upon today.
So, do we have a motion? We can have more discussion if need be.
Put something on the table.
When is this due to be at planning commission?
It doesn't need to go to planning commission because there's no new square footage to be added to the center.
Okay, so we are
So this
the
is
last
This is
stop.
it, yes.
Okay.
And that's why I'm really recommending, for those of you that have worked on subcommittees in the past, it really works. So you have a very close interaction with staff and the applicant. And, it could be once or twice meeting, and normally it has worked effectively. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, and as the moment we get revisions from the applicant, we will send those to you via email, and you can make your comments until we are satisfied that he has addressed all those comments. Then we can convene, and then we'll go through those plans. That could be done in a week or two.
Oh, sure, with this, it's not a normal procedure, but since you're our only issue today, I think it's fine.
Yeah.
As far as working with a subcommittee, that could be arranged. We could make an appointment next week and start marking up a set of plans right then and there, and then take them back and bring them back the following week for a review, and then get new color work, new landscape, and we could accomplish it that way. So working with a subcommittee is great.
Well, I have to say, as I listened to your responses the first time, you really listened to us and had a feel for what we were asking for. So I really think the subcommittee process could be a valuable way to move this project ahead and work together. I mean, it's obviously an applicant that's willing to work with us and listen to us. And I think whomever we end up with on the committee will understand the comments that everybody here has brought forward so we can represent what we're looking at.
Mr. Chair, in addition to that, this is recorded, so we will have compiled all those comments, and you will have copies of those comments at the subcommittee meeting, so you know what you're looking at.
Is it appropriate for me to make a motion?
Absolutely.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve this project subject to the developer working with a subcommittee of the Architectural Advisory Committee to summarize and bring together all the comments that we've made today. And if the subcommittee is pleased with the resubmitted project, then the project would be approved and sent to the director. If the subcommittee feels we're still struggling and it hasn't worked, then it would need to come back to us. And using the list of comments that Edward gave us and any more, I'm going to guess the applicant wrote down more comments than Edward did, so I think we're on the same page.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion approved.
Subcommittee.
Who wants to be on, Sean's on the subcommittee?
Yeah.
The lesson is show
I would
up.
volunteer to.
Okay, Tom Dosey will be on the subcommittee, so that's a landscape, how about an architect?
I'll do it. I'll do it.
Steve, and I think two's enough.
Yep.
And you're free to contact any of us, of course, with comments and stuff as you're working through this with them.
Sure.
Thank you for volunteering. So you have one licensed architect and one licensed landscape architect, so we'll have some good comments for you.
When do we want to do the first meeting?
We'll let you know. Yeah. Glenn will contact you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Are there any committee member comments on this or any other items? As Edward said, Flynn at our last meeting suggested that there's only one meeting in November, which would be this meeting. Talking to Edward, there are a few potential projects coming through, so there might be a meeting later in the month. The planning staff will let us know as soon as they have a feel. Because I would hate to have a project get postponed because we aren't able to meet. We are definitely going to be meeting, though, on December 2nd. Any staff comments?
No, that's it. You've covered it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I think we're adjourned.
All right.